Picture this. The heavy wooden doors of the country's highest courtroom swing shut. The room falls dead silent. The scales of justice are just hanging there, perfectly balanced in the air. Welcome to this explainer. Today we are completely decoding Chapter 7 of the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023. We're going to strip away all that dense legal jargon and get right to the absolute core of the burden of proof. We're not just reading the law today, folks, we're stepping right into it.
Just think about it for a second. If a courtroom goes completely silent, absolutely no evidence is presented by anyone, who actually loses? It's a pretty intense scenario, right? Legal battles, you see, aren't just about who has the better story. Fundamentally, they're about who bears the weight of actually proving that story. If you can't carry that weight, justice is just going to slip right through your fingers.
So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, Section 104, the general rule. Second, Section 105, who loses. Third, Section 106 on particular facts. And finally, we'll synthesize it all with the golden formula.
All right, let's dive straight into Section 104, the general rule. This right here is the foundational pillar of all courtroom evidence.
So what exactly is the burden of proof? Simply put, it's the legal obligation of the person who wants the court to rule in their favor. You have to prove the facts that your specific claim depends on. To put it in plain English, if you want the judge to side with you, it is entirely on your shoulders to prove your case. You absolutely cannot just point fingers. You've got to bring the receipts.
Let's ground this in a real-world scenario. Imagine person A walks into court and says, "Hey, person B never paid back my 5 lakh rupees and I want my money." Now, person A can't just expect the judge to magically hand them a check, right? Person A has to do the heavy lifting. Step 1, they have to prove the transaction actually happened. Step 2, they need to prove that the 5 lakh liability still exists today. And step 3, they've got to show that this money is legally recoverable. Because A wants the judgment in their favor, the burden is 100% on A.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The Supreme Court explained this brilliantly in the 2006 landmark case, Anil Rishi v. Gurbakh Singh. There is a massive night-and-day difference between burden of proof and onus of proof. The burden of proof generally stays put. It remains locked on the person trying to establish a fact. But the onus of proof, that can actually shift. If the plaintiff comes in and presents an incredibly strong, rock-solid case right out of the gate, the onus then shifts over to the defendant to prove why that case is wrong. Moving right along to Section 105. This is all about asking who loses and figuring out exactly where the legal weight rests. Check out this property dispute. Person A claims ownership of a piece of land that is currently being held by person B. The trial kicks off. The judge is waiting. But imagine that neither A nor B bring any evidence whatsoever. 0 documents, 0 witnesses, crickets. So who loses? Well, person A loses. Because person A completely failed to establish their ownership, the court literally cannot disrupt the current status quo. Section 105 tells us that the burden naturally falls on the person who would suffer an adverse judgment if absolutely 0 evidence was presented by either side.
Understanding how these two sections connect is absolutely crucial. Section 104 is proactive. It's asking who must prove their asserted fact. Section 105, on the other hand, is completely reactive, asking who loses if no evidence is provided. Together, they form this airtight framework for identifying the legal weight in literally any courtroom situation.
Think about this phrase for a second. The burden generally remains, but the onus may shift. If you start off by presenting a super strong case as the property owner, boom, you've carried your burden. Immediately, the onus shifts to the person occupying the land to explain exactly why they're there. But, and this is a big but, the ultimate burden of proving your legal ownership never actually leaves your shoulders. All right, let's look at Section 106. This deals with particular facts, which means proving highly specific claims and details. So what exactly is a particular fact? It's a specific, isolated claim that a party relies on, and it's totally distinct from the general allegations of a case. Basically, if you bring a highly specific, unique claim into a courtroom, the law demands highly specific proof from you. Let's use an everyday example like an alibi to really nail this down. Say you're facing a general allegation for an incident in Mumbai. But, step 1, you claim an alibi. You introduce a particular fact, stating you were actually in Delhi when it happened. Step 2, you want the court to believe this specific detail to clear your name. Therefore, in step 3, Section 106 drops the burden of proof entirely on you. Proving you were in Delhi is exclusively your job. You can't just say, "I was in Delhi, now prove I wasn't." You brought up the particular fact, so you've got to prove it.
And hey, this isn't just theoretical textbook stuff. The Supreme Court hammered this home in the 2011 case of Parimal v. Veena. The court strictly ruled that if you rely on an affirmative particular fact, you and you alone strictly bear the burden of proving it. You want the court's trust? You've got to pay the price in evidence.
Okay, now for my favorite part, the golden formula. Let's synthesize all these BSA evidence sections into one master framework.
If you ever find yourself tangled up in a complex legal case, just ask yourself these 3 simple questions. 104. Who asserts? Like, who is actually claiming the fact? 105. Who loses? If the lights go out and there's zero evidence, who suffers the loss? And 106. Who relies on a particular fact? Which person needs the judge to believe one highly specific detail? This super easy formula turns a dense legal chapter into an incredibly sharp, practical checklist.
Let's do a quick recap of the landmark rulings that give these rules their teeth. In 2006, Anil Rishi versus Gurbaksh Singh taught us the vital difference between a static burden and a shifting onus. And in 2011, Parimal versus Veena cemented the rule that the burden of proving a particular fact lies squarely with the person asserting it. Lock this table into your memory, guys. It's absolute gold.
Now, for the veteran legal professionals watching this explainer, here's a quick historical bridge for you. Everything we just covered, sections 104, 105, and 106 of the new BSA 2023, they correspond perfectly to sections 101, 102, and 103 of the old Indian Evidence Act from 1872. The core principles of justice haven't changed, they've just been updated for a modern legal era.
As we wrap up our journey today, we arrive at this timeless legal maxim: he who asserts must ordinarily prove. It's literally the heartbeat of a fair justice system. But before we fade to black, I want to leave you with one provocative thought. If proving what you assert is the golden rule, what exactly happens when the law, under certain special circumstances, presumes you are guilty and actively forces you to prove that you're innocent? We're going to dive into that shifting burden of proof in our next explainer. Until then, keep asking questions and keep learning.